I will talk about a little bit about me, and then I will talk about bad news, but we will finish with good news, so don't worry. Uh, that's me. I was born in Argentina, and my grandparents were from a small shtetl close to Odessa, and because of the pogroms, they moved to Argentina. They wanted to go to the state, which was a bad decision to go to Argentina, but it was the only option. So they went to Argentina, where both my parents were born, and I was born there in Argentina, where I grew up. This long time ago. And I went to a Jewish school, and then I went to a Zionist movement. And at the age of 17, I entered to work as a youth leader, as a madrich, in the biggest JCC in town called Hebraica. I think there are some people here from Hebraica, Buenos Aires. And after that, I spent 12 years in that JCC, and I ended there being the director of all the youth department. And then I decided, together with my wife, we decided that it was enough to be in Argentina, and we moved to Spain. We moved to Barcelona, which was 24 years ago. So it means that, in a way, I have the feeling, even the privilege, as it was mentioned, I work for JDC, and I travel across Europe. And sometimes I have the feeling that when I visit any Jewish community, I have the eyes of a newcomer. In other words, the eyes of a child. So I can look at what's going on in the JCCs and the communities with a very interesting perspective, at least from me, it kind of from outside. So I would like to share 4 short stories. The first one, when I came together with my wife, when we came to Barcelona 24 years ago, when it was Rosh Hashanah, we went to there was only one synagogue there, and we went there. And we enjoyed the Rosh Hashanah there in that synagogue. 24 years later, this year, there was 5 places to go to celebrate Rosh Hashanah in Barcelona. It means that, in one hand, there is more Jewish activity, but in the other hand, what had happened was that every time there was a crisis in any of these communities, a new community was created. In other words, Barcelona people are good on creating Jewish life, and they are bad on dealing with crisis. So this is the first story. Second story, a few years ago, working for JDC, and we were doing kind of research on try to understand certain things with the community and to help them to develop and to do a kind of strategical plan. We started listening to Jews that were not active, were not affiliated to any Jewish community center, which is an exercise I really recommend. And I met a girl, an 18-year-old girl, and she told me, look, Mario, I went once to a party. It was the activity of the youth club, and no one said hello to me, no one welcomed to me there in that party. I spent 3 hours sitting, it was a nice blonde girl. No one came to me to say, do you want to dance? So after 3 hours of being alone, not talking to anyone, I decided to quit the place, and I decided that I will not come anymore to any Jewish program. The third story is about a Jewish community that did a research to understand what the young people in their community, what was mainly their interests, what they were wanted to do in terms of activities and so on. And basically what they did was just to ask those young people that were active in the community. To make it short, the research, the answer, the conclusion, we knew already in advance before doing that. And the last story is that I met the president of a small community that was in East Europe, and there was election. It was a JCC of about 3,000 members, and he said to me, he showed me the list of the candidates for the board, and I asked him, where's young people? By the way, for me, young people is 20 years old, but in the Jewish world, young people is 40, more or less. So I said, where is the young people? 40, okay. And he said, listen, young people are not ready to run this business. What these 4 stories have in common? It's time to move. I can't do too many things at the same time. Okay. What do these stories have in common? First of all, besides that we are Jews, we are human beings. And our tendency as human beings is to create groups. And when we create groups, in a way, we create groups with people that think in a way like us, have similar background, similar interest, maybe in same age, many things that we have in common. So at the same time we create this group, what we do, and that's a tendency, is we segregate. We segregate others that are different. And that's something that we, even Jews, even when we speak about nice things, we do. So, in a way, what we do is we say we need to reach out, we need to do things and so on, but in parallel, what we do is concretely we segregate people that are different to us. In Europe, and especially in West Europe, most of the Jewish organizations have been created after the Second World War. And basically have been created under paradigms of last century. In other words, there is very little place for the debate, very little place sometimes even for democracy to say, okay, I think differently, we can discuss. But at the end of the day, it's also very human because communities, and not Jewish communities, any kind of community, of group of people, create boundaries. And when we create boundaries, we create because we need. We need to define who is part of a community. We need to define who can be elected to be in the board. We need to define who is going to pay fees and so on. So boundaries are necessary. The problem is sometimes Jewish community center, I'm talking about, again, Europe, I'm not talking about America or South America or Israel. Sometimes we create boundaries and we leave people outside. And in general, again, people that have maybe a different background as we have. And what we see is that in this traditional model of organization, very few are just considering that we are having new models of families, that we are having different type of people coming here or there, that there are no programs, for instance, for children of mixed marriage and things like that, that we think that should be considered in a way. So what we see is that there is not really, besides people say we are small, we need to grow, there is not a genuine, sincere way of thinking, reaching out, because at the end of the day, we are afraid to the difference. We are afraid, we don't want to put ourselves to the risk that someone coming from outside, even if it's a Jew, can say something different than what I say. I know the case in a Jewish school where they prefer to have non-Jewish kids, and they leave a lot of Jewish kids outside because they don't want to change the school, the traditional model. So, what we see is a lot of communities becoming like fortresses. In other words, even we put, a lot of bitachon, a lot of security, and it's very hard to enter. And what we see is that is people meeting their friends, talking about always their same things, and not having real discussions. And in general, what we see is many of these places are completely empty. They have few activities during the week, but not really, they're not really full of people how should be. It's interesting because it's written there. There is an anthropologist called Marc Auger that he's talking about something called no place. Like airports, like hotels, like malls. And in some cases, JCCs are becoming like no place, where you go there and you don't feel something like connected to you personally. Maybe there is a picture, an old picture from Israel, whatever, but you don't feel that perspective of feeling at home. So the problem is sometimes leaders say there is no other way to run the business. This is the only way. But sometimes the problem is that what we perceive as impossibility, it's an impotence. In other words, it's a personal feeling that I am afraid to make any change because I will be against my parents or because I will be against tradition and so on. So I'm afraid that that's a personal feeling. So that's the bad news. But in a way, we have good news here, and I would like to share, because in the other hand, what we see is a lot of people welcoming the 21st century. In other words, we start to see that not everything is in that way, and there are people across Europe thinking with new paradigms. There is another sociologist, which is Jewish, is Polish, living in the UK, called Zygmunt Bauman, that he speaks about liquid modernity. And it's quite interesting because he described the time we are living. And one of the things he said is that we don't know what will happen to us in the future. We can live, many of you will reach the 100 years, even some of you will reach the 120. Not my case, but many of you for sure. And what is true is that today we can change many things. We can change family, we can have many partners, we can change even the sex. Some people at the age of 60 say, I'm not anymore heterosexual, I am gay. So there are a lot of things. I, by the way, did some research. There is only one thing I learned that we cannot change in our life, which is the team football. The team football is forever. The rest of the things is always might change. Now, what happened when things might change? What happened, and this is something that Bauman described, is that communities today are more much needed than ever in a way, but not in the way we used to think. What he says is that we people, because of the uncertainty, we have fears, and we need support of communities. Now, the challenge is what type of community, because it's not about giving a safe place in terms of security. It's not about bitajón. It's about finding a place where I can feel safe. So I propose to define communities as networks. Networks with hubs. And instead of thinking that JCCs are buildings, let's start thinking that JCCs are the places for the Jews in town. And what we see in Europe is that there are a lot growing, and today I think was Diego mentioned, a lot of initiative of people, especially young people, that they don't feel comfortable in this traditional model for organization. Because everything they want to develop, what they find is a no. There is no money, you can't, it will not work, and so on. So a lot of people start to create their own organizations. What we can learn from that is that communities are not defined anymore by a place, like a building. The whole concept of trying to bring people to come to a place is problematic. The whole concept of reaching out is, I bring someone to my place, is very problematic. People meet by interest and like active interaction. If we can define communities as network, we see people that like to define themselves according to which network they belong. So these grassroots organizations are open enough that let people that are from the inner circle of Jewish life in the city find their place. So in a way, this promotes that people that were not part of a formal organization can enter and can come. There are plenty of examples. And at the end of the day, what people are looking is for experiences. So again, if we're talking about the crisis of institution, one of the crises is about, I'm taking the 2 minutes from you. No, it's a joke. I have 2 minutes. I'm not taking any more. I'm finishing. So what we see is crisis of the way we learn. And the way we learn, in most of your JCCs, the way to learn is you go to a conference, and what you do is you look into the neck of the person sitting in front of you. So there is no interaction, very little interaction. You come, you listen, and you go. This is more or less the model. It can be a course, can be a lecture. Even a very sophisticated JCC today in London that was created, more or less in some cases that's the thing. Now, another trend we see in these successful experiences is that it's about providing services. And I learned that in the USA, at the beginning of last century, one of the most successful programs was to give English lessons to immigrants. In other words, it was a service. It was something that people were needed. And today we have some experiences where some organizations are providing job opportunities to youngsters. And this is a way to bring them into the Jewish life. So it's about changing a paradigm. So moving from a consumer model where we buy something, we buy a service. I come to a conference and I buy it. I buy food or whatever. It's a consumer model to a model where Judaism is about learning, but learning through the experience. And at the end of the day, the experience is with the others. So the question here is what type of community we build. When we say Jewish community centers, the challenge is what type of community we build. And today, learning is learning with others. It's about an experience. Let me finish with a story. Part of my job that Mark didn't mention is that I am the one working for JDC helping the French Jewish community. I am one of them. And after the hyper-kasher attacks, I started to come very often to Paris. And once I met the lady that it's, I'm finishing. It's something red saying that I'm over. But I met the responsible for all the Bitajón program, all the security program. She said to me, Mario, we used to work to sing Bitajón as a way of providing a service to the community. And after Hypercacher, we learned something. And she told me the following. She said, we start working with the schools, and we start working with parents. And we invite parents to become volunteers in the process of Bitajón. In other words, security was not just only a matter of us, but also a matter of the parents. Now, it comes now the good point. The parents start to come to volunteers in the community. But what happened? They say, we are having good time. This is not all the school, but some of the school, we are having good time, we are enjoying, and let's be engaged into the school life. So let's start to do something for the school. So you see that the process is engaging people and becoming a Jewish experience. Thank you so much, Mark, for the time. For an Argentinian, it's absolutely impossible to be on time. Absolutely.
I think you did great. Round of applause for Mario.